Good day, ladies and gentlemen. And from that title, you know it's a real good day because we got a K98k. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, let's pull back a little bit so we can get this all in frame. We're going to try to at least. Really far back. There we go. Believe me, this is not as long as it might otherwise look. That's suggestive. This is actually the short rifle version of the Gewehr 98. Ladies and gentlemen, the K98k has been my dream gun literally as long as the M1 Garand was my dream gun, over 20 bloody years. But I really didn't expect to actually find this bloody thing. You see, a dream gun can be many things. A dream gun can be a gun that is basically a unicorn, like one was made. Or a gun that is extremely expensive. Or a gun that, while not extremely expensive, is expensive enough that you don't really want to spend the money to get it. The K98k is a very well-loved rifle because, well, it has that mystique. It has that gravitas about it that all the other Mauser action rifles really don't have except for maybe the Gewehr 98. This here is a rifle that is every bit as legendary as the M1 Garand. You know, I was going to be pretty happy just to have a Mauser. When I went looking for a Mauser 2 weeks ago, as of this recording anyway, I was looking for just a Turkish Mauser. I was perfectly happy to have that. Maybe a Yugo, but I expected the Yugos to be ridiculously expensive at this point. Never in a million years did I think I would actually find a K98k for the price that I found it. It was so inexpensive, ladies and gentlemen, I was practically dancing out the door. So, what K98k did I end up with? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a 1944 BYF, which is the factory code for Mauser Obendorf. We got a Mauser brand Mauser here, people. Russian capture. Now, what's a Russian capture, you might ask? A Russian capture is wherein the Russians captured a bunch of these. They matched up what parts that worked and then electro-penciled an X. Sometimes the Russian captures will have X's on all the parts, and sometimes they'll just have the one. I lucked out and got just the one electro-penciled X on the receiver. And that's not even an X. Rather, it is supposed to be crossed rifles, and that's supposed to denote that the rifle is fully functional. And as you'll see from the shooting, oh yes, it is very functional indeed. Russian captures are also denoted by the fact that it doesn't have the locking screw, which, as far as I can tell, really isn't necessary, and the front sight hood. Now, early war Mauser rifles did not actually have, or I should specifically say K98Ks, specifically did not have a front sight hood. In fact, they didn't even have a provision for a front sight hood. This one does, and I do happen to have a Yugo Repro. I have not added it simply because I still need to drift this for windage. Now, I've also added a Repro K98k sling. This is actually fairly easy to sling up. It's a little complicated, but once you figure it out, it goes on pretty easily. Now, one thing that is kind of weird and doesn't come across in videos is when you actually shoulder the rifle, you can potentially get a bit of the sling, but when you're actually shooting, it doesn't really impinge on your hand in any way. Now, the Mauser 98 action is something that all the fanboys love talking about. And you know what? All the fanboys are right. This is a very, very smooth action. I never had to fight the bolt at any time. It definitely is a little less easy to bolt home and open up than the number 4 Mark 1's action, the cocked-on close, but it's a lot smoother than that action. Essentially, while the number 4 Mark 1 is a little easier to bolt back and forth, you don't have, when you bolt home, that little extra pressure you have to put on it. So I would take a little more stiffness versus that you kind of got to cram it in there. And the Mosin bolt doesn't even compare. Now, one of the great aspects of the Russian capture is the fact that you can sometimes luck out and get some really cool parts on here. Case in point, my rear sight here is actually an early war rear sight. I keep wanting to call that a front sight for some reason. It's not. You can tell it's an early war rear sight because it actually has number markings on the bottom of it for some reason. I'm not really sure why they did that, but it's really cool that I have it. We also have a late war butt plate. And I'm showing you this because you know what? 7.92 by 57 millimeter, which is the caliber of this rifle, hits hard. My shoulder still hurts. Early war, it stuck out a bit more. That was so you could do the old bashy. I would not want to be bashied by that, but I also don't want my shoulder to be bashy by that either. One thing that is pretty cool about this rifle that I don't think it's really mentioned all that much is that trigger. By the Great Space Dragon, ladies and gentlemen, that trigger has got to be the best military trigger I have ever used. And you'll probably see its provenance in the shooting footage. But that trigger is excellent. Yes, you can get an aftermarket trigger for this rifle, but I don't really see why you would need to do so. Now, the wood we have on this rifle is also absolutely excellent. This is actually the laminated stock. It's stronger than walnut, and it doesn't swell up or anything like that, and it just looks good. I think this actually looks better than walnut, and there's a lot more going on in terms of the wood. It's not just basic brown. The stock has survived quite well throughout the years. There's a few minor dings here and there. There appears to be an arsenal repair. Let's see if we can get that arsenal repair right there. But overall, the stock is in great shape. The metal is in an absolutely amazing shape. A lot of these K98Ks that I see in YouTube videos, sometimes they don't even have any finish at all. It's just in the white. Or a lot of the bolt is in the white or something like that. But as we can see here, all the finish is pretty much still on there. There is a mixture of original bluing and some of the black paint that the Russians like to use. The wood, when I first got the rifle, was just completely filled with crud. The metal was as well, as was the bore, which we'll get to in a moment. Basically, to clean the metal, all I had to use was some Balisol wipes, and to clean the wood, I actually used just a basic Lysol cleaner, and it cleaned up absolutely amazingly. The bore, when I initially looked at it, was completely dark. I never really knew what a dark bore rifle was until now, and yeah, it was filled with all kinds of crud. But a bore brush and some hoppies later, and this thing was completely clean, and actually is quite shiny, to say the least. And it functions absolutely flawlessly as well. Disassembling this rifle is pretty bloody easy. You take out 2 screws, you remove the barrel band, which is just held in by a spring, which is actually pretty easy to move, or at least on this one was. However, if you are going to remove the barrel band, you need to be careful. Put a towel or something on there, because I actually jabbed my finger on that sharp front sight. Not fun. It didn't break the skin, but it hurt quite a bit. I did add one aftermarket part to this rifle, and that is a taller front sight. I do not know if this was something that was actually used in the field or not. I've seen a variety of forum posts that say it was, and some that say it wasn't. Whatever the case may be, this was a taller front sight that I picked up from the website Liberty Tree Collectors, along with the sling and the front sight hood and some stripper clips, which we'll get to in a moment. This taller front sight is an absolute necessity if you actually want to shoot one of these rifles. With the original front sight, it's almost impossible to see the bloody thing. But with that aftermarket front sight, when you look down the sights, you can actually see the front sight, and it's a very nice point shooter indeed. I think if I had tried to use the original front sight, I would have not gotten as many hits as I had with as little practice as I have with this particular rifle. Now, one other thing I want to bring up that should be obvious, but isn't. This right here is for placing in stripper clips. I had no idea what that little cut was for until I saw a video slightly before I got this rifle. And it actually is quite convenient. It makes loading the Mauser with stripper clips seem almost a pain in comparison. And speaking of the stripper clips, I was able to pick up some from Liberty Tree Collectors. These are much more expensive than M1 Garand clips. I can get 10 M1 Garand clips for $13 on eBay. I got 5 of these for $15. And one of them even had a little dent, which was easy enough to fix with just a punch and a hammer, but still. These clips work every bit as good as all the hype says they do, although you still can botch reloads. In fact, I did botch a bloody reload or two during the shooting footage. That's just one of the things that can happen. I mean, these are the best stripper clips I've ever used, but you can still mess it up even then. Now, today, we're going to be shooting 40 rounds of PPU 198 grain ball ammo. Now, the caliber for this rifle is 7.92 by 57, but just about everything says it's 8mm. They just round it up to that. Now, this 8mm PPU ammo is supposed to be a bit on the light side, mainly because this is kind of expected to be used not only in K98ks, but also Gewehr 98s, and potentially even upgraded commission rifles. So it's designed to be as universal as possible. Now, this worked fairly well in this rifle, but I suspect that there were a couple of keyholes here and there. I'm not 100% sure. It could just be that the target was blowing in the wind and it just kind of distorted the overall hole, but this might have keyholed or might not. I'm not 100% certain on that. But overall, this ammo worked. All the primers worked. It cycled 100%. Overall, I'm quite impressed by this PPU ammo, and it's not even that expensive. I got this off of sgammo.com, and this was only $13 a box of 20. So, overall, it's not going to break the bank to shoot, and it's still, even though this is supposed to be a light loading, that still hurts. So now, let's take this out to the 25-yard line and see if we can even hit the paper.
The Russian gun used by the Russians in World War II. It's called the gun. World War II because this is called a cruciform bayonet. Most of them have like a blade. This one, ram it into somebody, it makes a cross. It's impossible to shoot. And if it hits a blood vessel, it's still Russian.
I know. Well, as you can see, we hit the paper a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that's only 25 yards, but I have had it be where I try to shoot a rifle open sights and I can't even hit at 25 yards. That's very rare, but it has happened. I was able to see the sight pretty easily. I was able to kind of figure out where I'm shooting. I still need to adjust for windage because I think I'm shooting really far to the left, but that's an easy enough fix. I'll be honest, ladies and gentlemen, I just started having fun, and, you know, this is a 5-shot bolt-action rifle, shooting a high-powered rifle cartridge, but you can crank those shots out pretty fast. And yeah, I just started having fun because this thing's just great. And really, that sight is excellent. I mean, it's not an aperture sight, but it really is quite easy to pick up. Now, let's take my last 10 rounds out to the 100 and see if we can do just as good.
That thing was like, one stock was like this one was this far. It was a short barrel right now. Top, hit the board. Upper corner of the paper. Gotcha. Right side of bull. On the right, upper right.
So, 2 out of 10 shots ain't bad. I've actually done a little bit worse with scoped rifles. Shooting 100 yards is not as easy as the other YouTubers make it out to be. It's really bloody far, and any little mistake on your part can really throw off your hits. Getting 2 shots, even though it was really far to the left, I really got to drift adjust that bloody sight. Thankfully, adjusting that front sight is really easy. Literally, it's just a punch and a hammer, and you give a little tap, tap, taparoo, and you're good to go. But still, though, 2 out of 10 shots with a rifle I've never shot before makes me pretty happy. Because you have to remember, this is not a precision rifle. This is a military rifle. This is designed for use in combat. And really, with iron sights, according to my research, this is a 3 MOA gun. And it really wasn't designed to be that amazingly super accurate. And yet, I, a complete novice when it comes to this rifle, and not really good at shooting 100 yards, was still able to get 2 hits out of 10 at 100 yards. First time out. When I finally get around to doing the review, I will have definitely gotten a lot more practice, and I imagine those groups will, of course, tighten up considerably. Now, before I do the review, I'm going to put 250 rounds to this thing. These first 40 count, so that means it's only 210 rounds, but it's still quite a few rounds to say the least. And by that point, there should actually be a group in the bullseye. At least I hope. Shooting open sights, anything at 100 yards is not easy, but I get the feeling with a little more practice and some drift adjustment, this is going to perform pretty well. already with this first range trip with this rifle, that special sauce is there. There is something special about the K98k. And you know, this is a rifle I do recommend, and I want to say this more than anything else. Do not give up on your dreams, so to speak. If you want a K98k, look for it. That's what I did. I got lucky. The third gun shop I went to had one. You know, and I was able to use my bargaining skill to get the price to a very reasonable level that had me so happy you have no idea. So if you really, really want a K98k, just look for one. You know, it might take more than 3 shops, but keep looking and get the rifle that you really want. And this is GeneralLotz wishing you good, oh, so good, K98k. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you this awesome content.